At 963 feet, with a gross weight of 69,053 tons, the Queen Elizabeth II is probably the most famous passenger ship in the world. Her spectacular profile in Southampton water as she arrives at her home port never fails to draw an audience. So it's perhaps not surprising that she's considered by many to be the last great liner. Since going into service in 1969, the Cunard Line's flagship has visited over 200 places around the world and carried nearly 2 million passengers, as well as serving her country during the Falklands crisis of 1982. Over the years, she's earned an enviable reputation of being the ultimate cruise liner and the most luxurious way to leisurely cross the North Atlantic, offering 30 different grades of accommodation from a modest cabin for two to prestigious penthouse suites and the legendary Cunard service. Her significance is such that as part of her Silver Jubilee celebrations in 1994, she received a special birthday salute by the world-renowned Red Arrows. By the mid-1960s, the QE2's predecessors, the Queens Mary and Elizabeth, were nearing the end of their time in service. The 81,000-ton Queen Mary, seen here, having been launched in 1934, and her sister ship, the Elizabeth, at 83,000 tons in 1938. Together, the Queen Mary, the fastest liner in the world, and the Queen Elizabeth, the largest, ruled the North Atlantic during a golden age of travel, offering a weekly transatlantic service between Southampton and New York via Cherbourg. Cunard's queens were the way to cross, and passenger lists often read like a page from Who's Who, with famous names from stage and screen rubbing shoulders with politicians and heads of state. But by the late 1950s, the need for a weekly service across the North Atlantic was coming to an end as air travel became increasingly popular. Lacking air conditioning, except in certain public rooms, and too large to traverse the Suez and Panama canals, the two giant queens were considered unsuitable for an alternative role as cruise ships. Their successor would need to be a great deal more flexible to meet the demands of the new era. Sadly, the Queen Elizabeth was destroyed by fire, having been sold by Cunard. But preserved in Long Beach, California, the Queen Mary survives. John Brown worked as part of the design team on each of the Queens, including the QE2.
I had a hand in the early stages of the planning, the development, to the extent that we had sufficient data about the ship to prepare a tender, and the tender was submitted. I had the privilege of submitting that tender. The competition, and there was competition at that time, came from Swan Hunter. I think Harlan's dropped out and Camel Laird weren't in it. The competition was Swan Hunter. Swan Hunter had been building ships for Scandinavia and had started a new development using aluminium alloy. Cunard was very conservative about their structural arrangements, probably correctly so. The use of the aluminium alloy, the proposal to use it, meant that it could be a lighter ship, a smaller ship, and with less power. And so that cost-wise, it was going to be quite a bit cheaper. And it turned out to be so. We decided that it would be a good thing to find out